Good afternoon, and thank you for participating in today's webinar, Sage Intacct, Streamlining Your Year-End Close. A little about Forvis Mazars. We are an independent member of Forvis Mazars Global, a leading global professional services network. Ranked among the largest public accounting firms in the U.S., our team members are dedicated to providing an unmatched client experience through the delivery of assurance, tax, and consulting services. As part of the firm's consulting services, Business Technology Services provides analysis, design, implementation, upgrade, training, and support services for accounting and ERP systems and sales and marketing CRM systems. Our end-to-end solutions can help clients achieve their digital transformation goals. At a glance, these are the technologies Business Technology Services supports. Today, we'll be focusing on Sage Intacct ERP. Our presenter today is Sheila Beck. Sheila is a managing consultant in our Sage Intacct practice. She has over 25 years of experience in accounting, financial reporting, software implementations, and internal controls. She focuses on the design, configuration, training, and support of Sage Intacct's cloud-based ERP solution for clients. Sheila has worked in various industries, including nonprofit, government, real estate and construction, healthcare, natural resources, manufacturing, and more. She is a member of the American Institute of CPAs and the Kentucky Society of Certified Public Accountants. Sheila also holds certifications from Sage for accounting and implementation for Sage Intacct and implementation for Sage Intacct Construction. Again, thank you for participating in today's webinar. Now I will turn over the presentation to Sheila.
Thank you, Sarah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to review Sage Intacct functionality that will help you streamline your year-end close. Before we dive in, I'd like to share some information about Sage Intacct. It is a cloud-based solution that provides innovative accounting and ERP tools for mid-sized organizations. Sage Intacct is the AICPA's #1 preferred accounting application. Forvis Mazars has over 30 years of experience as a Sage partner, selling software and assisting our clients with implementations and ongoing support. Sage Intacct has received numerous awards for customer support, software innovation, and other wins. Before we go through our main agenda for today, I did want to provide a slide here that contains resources that I'm going to mention over the course of the next hour. If you have not yet downloaded the presentation materials, I recommend that you do so that you can access these links directly to learn more after today's webinar. One quick note about the second listing on this slide. The Sage Intacct year-end processing tips article. Sage Intacct did release additional content in their release 4 update in November that came out after the original publication date of that article. And some of those things we will be covering during today's webinar, but we wanted you to have this slide specifically, and it also repeats near the end of the presentation materials as well. So this is our agenda for today. We've got 8 main topics to discuss streamlining the year-end close, checklists and assignments, closing the subledgers, reconciling subledgers to the general ledger, recording journal entries, reconciling bank and credit card accounts, verifying results, closing the general ledger, and preparing for 2024 Form 1099 reporting. So we are going to have our first polling question as we get started. We would like to know what brings you to today's webinar. We've got 3 answers here. If you could please take a moment and answer the one that best describes your primary reason for joining us today.
Yes, thank you. And just to reiterate what Sheila said, this presentation is available to download here in the webinar platform. We also have links to related content within the presentation deck, and then also linked here in the webinar platform, including the Sage Intacct year-end processing tips article that's available on our 4 sites section of our website. So we'll give you a full minute to lock in your response. So if you're here to learn more about Sage Intacct and features to help with year-end close, go for option A. Option B is if you're considering or reviewing a new ERP system. And then, results are in, and it looks like almost a 50-50 split between learning more about Sage Intacct and then overall professional education. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, we're going to close out that polling question and continue on with our next slide. Okay, so this slide, it does have a lot of content on here due to the timing of today's webinar. I will not be able to talk about every bullet point on here in detail, but the main goal of this slide is to provide you with a lot of information about the artificial intelligence and machine learning functionality available in Sage Intacct, along with streamlined processes, workflows, and reports to help improve efficiency and cut down the time it takes to close your year end. The content on this slide represents some, but not all, of the functionality available in Sage Intacct. We recommend a thorough review of the system be performed and consult with your Forbes Mazars partner to identify any other areas that may benefit your organization. You see 3 columns here that we have of data, some artificial intelligence and machine learning related to transactions and transaction entry. Second column touches on AI for reporting and analysis. And then the last column has a few other modules to consider. So if you currently have some manual processes, say spreadsheets or Excel, that may be manually intensive and take a lot of time, there's 3 modules listed there that can help bring that efficiency into the system and replace those manual Excel types of processes. The topics here also fall into, I'd say, one of 3 categories as well. First, the feature is currently utilized by a large number of Sage Intacct customers. Or the second and third categories, the functionality or enhancement listed was part of the recent Sage Intacct 2024 Release 3 or Release 4 update that came out on August 9th and November 8th, respectively. The quarterly release notes can be accessed from your Sage Intacct homepage. As I mentioned, we won't be able to cover all these in depth today, but we are going to focus on and talk about some of the features on this slide that relate to your year-end close process. So again, just be sure to flag this page in your downloaded copy to refer back to later. I will also mention that any verbiage that you see in green, bold, or normal font, that addresses or lists an add-on subscription within Sage Intacct for specific areas across the system. Okay, so let's talk about checklists and assignments as we move forward here. So the checklists and assignments can be accessed from the company module within Sage Intacct. They can be created as high level or as detailed as you would like to make them. On the Setup tab of your company menu, that's where you can design the checklist options, categories, and statuses for your checklist and assignments. And then on the All tab of the menu is where you can actually manually add or import those checklists and assignments. So distinguish between what is options versus categories and statuses. Options is where you're going to make a few choices about user behavior for editing and modifying checklist. Categories would be those purposes of your checklist, such as year-end close or adding a vendor W-9 in the system, something like that. And of course, status is going to be something like not started, pending, completed. Their system, the system doesn't create them. They are user defined. So you have kind of free list there to add your categories and statuses. So this slide shows you a screenshot of an example assignment we have in a demo company. As I mentioned, there is an import on your company setup checklist to import assignments. The system will create IDs automatically. You can enter that assignment name, description, what checklist it's associated with, the user it will be assigned to, start date and due date. There is an internal control reference field. This is a free form text field So if your company has requirements such as, SOC, HIPAA, or ISO, you can use this field to indicate that relates to this assignment. Constraints, or what I like to use the word dependents, can be set up to indicate relationships between assignments in the order of completion. So for example, you may have in a checklist 2 detailed steps, such as creating customer invoices and receiving customer payments. Those may be a constraint for the AR subledger close, in that the 2 detailed transaction steps must happen on dates prior to closing the AR subledger. So that's how the constraints will work. Users can also add a % complete, the actual end date, a comment, and then there's also a place for attachments on assignments. This next slide here shows a screenshot of a checklist information in the system. Again, there's IDs created automatically. That name, description, category, owner, and status can be added by a user. Assignments associated with a checklist will appear in a table format. There are a few other columns out to the right of this tabular view. One of those includes a column with numbers where you can drill down into the constraints that show between those that are transaction related or the ones dependent on prior constraints. And you can add checklists to a dashboard, and in the company permissions area in your user or role permission, you can decide who you are giving list view, add, edit, and delete functions to for your checklist. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about closing the subledgers. So subledger provides the details that support general ledger balances. So as the accounting team begins the year-end close process, they're going to be entering all remaining detailed transactions for the year in subledgers. There are several subledgers in Sage Intacct depending on what modules you have currently subscribed to. So on the slide here, you see I've got a little bit of color designation. For those subledger titles that are in the blue font, these are subledgers that if you have subscribed to them and are using them, they can be closed individually in Sage Intacct by choosing the subledger close function on that module's menu. So cash management, accounts payable, accounts receivable, and then time and expenses, which is an add-on subscription module. If you have these, they do allow for separate subledger close. Other subledgers, so that you see the ones you see in green font here, other subledgers will close when the close books function is completed for the general ledger. So if you're using inventory, prepaids, fixed assets, those do not have a separate subledger close on their menus. They close when the general ledger is closed. So this feature allows you to lock the main subledgers while still having the ability to enter and record year-end journal entries in the general ledger, such as accruals or other journal entries outside of transactions recorded in these subledgers. We do have a special note indicated here, this red font that you see next to accounts payable, especially as we're sitting here in early December. We do like to call out, so before end of the year and obviously before closing your accounts payable and cash management subledgers, there's an important step to complete in preparation for your 2024 1099 reporting. Review list of outstanding checks on all of your bank reconciliations for any older checks not yet cashed by vendors. Cleanup may need to be performed to void missing or uncashed checks and reissue new checks to vendors for accurate 1099 balances. We're going to cover more on 1099 reporting later in section 8, but we did want to mention that here as we talk about separate subledger closes. So if you also like to stagger your close, if your business process requires that you close AP and AR on different days, Sage Intacct, of course, does support that because the 4 here in blue can separately be closed at the time of your choosing as part of your overall year-end close. Okay, so we're going to talk about a little bit more information about the subledgers. So when you close certain subledgers, that also closes any dependent module. So 2 main ones there to mention. When you close accounts payable, that also closes purchasing. When you close accounts receivable, that also closes order entry. So if you have subscribed to and are using purchasing and order entry, just note when you close AP and AR, those modules will be affected. We also recommend reviewing some draft or pending transaction types before closing your subledgers. So a few that we have mentioned here, review any transactions in a draft state to just make sure, should any of those be posted before you close that subledger. Take a look at any failed recurring transactions, go to that failure log, determine that reason, what corrective actions should be taken, and then resubmit those recurrences. Or last but not least, any submitted or partially approved transactions that have posting dates in a period to be closed. So a good example here is, if you're using the approvals in the accounts payable module, if there is an AP bill with a GL posting date in December of 2024, and that is in the approval queue but doesn't make it all the way through the approval process before the period is closed, then an error will generate when the final approver completes the approval process, because that's when the posting validation occurs. So just be mindful of these types of transactions to be sure that you review before closing your subledgers. Okay, so we'll move on to talk about reconciling those subledgers to the general ledger. So after subledgers have been closed, the next step would be to reconcile subledgers to the general ledger. What we have here on this slide is to mention a brand new feature that just came out in Sage Intacct's Release 4 update on November 8th. The AR Customer Reconciliation tool automatically matches payments and adjustments with corresponding invoices. The first slide or screenshot that you see here on the slide has 3 steps to occur before you begin running the tool and reviewing the report. First is in your AR setup configuration section. This is beneath the document sequencing area of configuration. That's where you will enable customer reconciliation. That's highlighted here for you. After that is enabled, you'll be able to navigate to the roles or user permissions and give users who need to work with this tool the relevant permissions to access it. And you will also want to create a document sequence. Alphabetical characters are required, and that is due to the system formatting of the matching sequence created. So uppercase letters indicate a payment is fully matched, so a single payment paid an invoice in full. If there's lowercase letters in that alpha sequence, that indicates a partial payment, and if there is no sequence, then that indicates that invoice is unpaid. So it's important to note this feature is available on a go-forward basis only. So that's my kind of bold green highlight here. Go-forward basis only from the point in time you enable it. So historical invoices and payments will not be matched with the matching sequences. So I mentioned that as a call-out note, just to be careful what time period you are running this reconciliation tool. Basically, it means don't use like an inception to date type of period when you run the customer reconciliation report. You'll want to use a different time period, such as current month or just current quarter to date. Again, those historical invoices payments will not be matched. So in a couple of slides, I am going to go into a Sage Intacct demo environment, and I'm going to show you a little bit closer look at one of these reconciliation reports. And I'm going to compare it to the existing AR ledger and AR aging, just to show you the differences and point out a little bit more about the details you see on the reports and the relationship of the 3 reports to each other. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit more about similar tool over on the accounts payable side. So again, also brand new from Release 4, where the AP vendor reconciliation tool will automatically match payments and adjustments with corresponding bills. So similar to AR, in configuration beneath the document sequencing section, that's where you enable it. and then go into permissions to assign that to users that need it. Again, alpha characters are what's required for the matching sequence. Similar pattern here, fully matched is uppercase, partial match is lowercase, or there's no sequence if it's unpaid. And then similar note also about the time period. So again, we're going to look at that in just a moment. And let's mention one more cool thing that you are able to do with your document sequences. So the alphabetical document sequence that's used for the AR and AP matches, that can be set up with a fiscal year rollover option, and then the choice of adding that as a prefix or suffix to your document sequence. So this is also a great option if your company has a legal requirement to number transactions using a sequence that includes a fiscal year. It's also ideal for those sequences on recurring bills or recurring sales invoices. Again, if you would like to, or if there is a requirement that the year be present in the sequence on those transactions. So this screenshot here shows you an example of the fiscal year rollover attached as the suffix. And so it does show you a table within that document sequence view screen where you can get a preview of what these unused sequences will look like by year. So that's the suffix example. Okay, so last note about the kind of reconciliation of these subledgers. So if certain people, they may not want to turn on the latest information from that release 4 yet. You may want to review that and test that in your sandbox first before deploying in production. If that is the case, you can of course still use the AR or AP ledger or the vendor or customer aging reports to reconcile your subledger balances back to the general ledger. Got a slide here that's showing, I pulled a general ledger report. You could also pull a trial balance to obtain, this is an AP example where I'm comparing my vendor aging report to the balance of accounts payable account on the GL to make sure those agree and they reconcile. So let me just talk a little bit about, for anybody who may not be familiar with these reports, because now we do have an option of 3. So the reconciliation tools that are new, those, like we mentioned, there's going to be a sequence that matches payments to invoices or bills. The AR or AP ledger, that has customer details for the account with invoices and payments or charges and payments, and then the current account balance as of the end of the period. Whereas an aging report, so that's going to be run at a single as of date, and it shows a list of customers or vendors who still owe you money as of that date. And then depending on whether you run it summary or detail, you may see bill or invoice detail or just one summary total, aged, how many days past due that is. So the AP or AR ledger, if you do not want to see, kind of a long history of the details of invoices and payments, then you can run that for, say current month or quarter date, something like that. When you do that, there will now be a summarized balance forward line at the top of that report. And I'm going to show you that here in a demo in just a second. That's a new presentation of the report since the reconciliation tools came out in release 4. If you do want to review all that detailed account history, then use a time period like inception to date, as opposed to something like current month or current quarter, which will show you more recent information and not full history. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen out now, and we're going to go into a Sage Intacct demo company. Okay, Sarah, if you can just confirm for me, I did see that pop up that you're able to see the screen share.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Okay, so what I have here in my demo company, we're going to look at 3 separate tabs here. So on this first tab, I have an AR ledger report open. I am looking at this for a single customer, Julian Hospo. So I'll show you quickly on this report. I am using an inception to date period. And what we can see here, of course, are all the charges, the payments, the balance, outstanding balance for Julian, at 12/31/24 is 7,000. On my second tab, I have the customer aging report open for the same customer. And now I can see the details. I've got 2 invoices that make up that $7,000 balance. My third tab, I have the new customer reconciliation report. So this will, again, once you enable that and give permissions, it's going to be listed here in the reports area of the all menu of AR or AP. And again, I'm running this for Julian Hospo, and I have capital letters, right, uppercase for full matches, lowercase alpha sequence for partial matches. But notice here it shows the balance is 16,000. That is because, so this invoice that was paid with 9,000, this payment was posted in the system on a date prior to when I turned on the new customer reconciliation tool. So that's why I say it's important for your customer reconciliation, rather than using inception to date period, change that to something like current month or current quarter to date. Let's have that be current month. Set that to 12/31. And now we have taken care of that matter, right? This is a go forward basis only. And when I use a time period that is shorter in length, more current, as opposed to inception to date, 7,000 is the correct outstanding balance for Julian Hospo, which matches the other 2 reports. So that's just a little bit more about the details of that new customer reconciliation tool, and just be mindful of the time period that you are running that, because it is on a go forward basis only. Okay, let's get back in here to the system. So a couple other notes about reconciling subledgers to the general ledger. So if you have any differences, we have a few callouts here about troubleshooting with those differences, finding the root cause and then corrective action for any differences. So credit card balances may affect an accounts payable reconciliation. Customer overpayments may affect an AR reconciliation. Any manual journal entries entered to accounts could affect both the accounts payable and accounts receivable reconciliations. So in Sage Intacct, if you've set them up, you're aware, but credit card accounts must be mapped to unique current liability accounts. They are not mapped to the accounts payable GL account. If you do decide to run the vendor aging report to reconcile, as opposed to the new AP vendor reconciliation tool, just note I've got here highlighted, there is a specific checkbox to include or exclude those credit card vendors, such as American Express or a bank's Visa. You can include the credit card transactions by checking this setting, or alternatively, you can leave credit card transactions in the report and then agree that report total to the sum of your AP GL account and any credit card liability GL accounts. In the area of accounts receivable, again, kind of first thing I recommend checking is, what is the default setting for where your overpayments are to be posted when you're receiving customer payments? So you can see in this example, again, this is from my demo company, if there's an overpayment on a customer receipt, this current liability account, it's called deposits deposits in custody is the name of that account. I would need to sum up the balance of 1,200, my AR account, and 2,420 to tie out to my AR report total that I'm reconciling to the general ledger. So just be mindful of that if you do have your overpayments mapped to a current liability account, again, which is common because that'd be money you owe back to them at that point in time, then you may need to sum those together. So last but not least, another common reason that a reconciliation difference may occur is if any users have recorded manual entries directly to what we call any of your control accounts. So recording directly to accounts payable, accounts receivable, an inventory account, fixed asset account, a prepaid, any of the accounts where you may have a subledger. A quick way to find that activity would be to generate a GL detail report for the account. So, it could be an example of we're running it for $1,200. And then in that GL report, scan that journal symbol column and look for any line items with GJ for, general journal, as opposed to any of your system journals like, the CRJ, cash receipts journal, or CDJ, cash disbursements journal. Those are where transactions that went through your subledger record. But if someone has posted a manual entry to a GJ or any other journal that you have created for another business purpose, scan that general ledger report to identify any manual entries, because the sum of those could be why your subledger report differs from a general ledger balance. Okay.
All right.
So here, oh, yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, I'll give you a break. Excellent demo and information so far. So we are pulling question 2, and it is, how many business days does it take for your current month-end close process? So A, 1 to 3 days, B, 4 to 6 days, C, 7 to 10 days, or D, 19 days or more. So no judgment, just trying to get an idea of, our audience today, what your month-end close process looks like, because we all know your month-end close will impact your year-end close. And I will say we had a different webinar yesterday where we talked about year-end close, and that spanned timelines from 3 days to 25 days. So I hope and pray that you are not in the 25-day category, but if you are, we are here to help. So go ahead and take the time to lock in those responses. And then there's a lot more to cover today, and here we go. All right, so we're looking, 10 or more days. And back to you, Sheila.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everyone, for the polling responses there. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about recording journal entries. Again, a lot of this, if you've been in the system, live in the system for, anywhere from 1 month to many years, we're gonna move through this fairly quickly because I think everyone is pretty familiar with the types of entries in the system. But you have, again, on your general ledger module, there are several types of entries that Sage Intacct has available for you to record your business transactions. So your standard entries are going to be, any entry that you make to a financial account. The recurring entry feature, this is a great one to use to automate something that you don't have to keep on a list or have to remember for someone to go and manually do it. Use recurring entries for any type of posting where the accounts, amounts, and dimensions do not change for the period that you want that to occur. A great example is if you're not utilizing the prepaids module, you can set up a recurring entry, to say expense, $12,000 of prepaid insurance, $1,000 a month over 12 months. You set the schedule. It's a great example of literally letting the system do the work for you. Memorize transactions. I have another screenshot here. You can find these at, if you go to your list of journals in GL, you'll see a green link to click on Memorize Transactions for that journal. These are transaction templates that you can use to record entries where you may have a slight change to accounts, amounts, or dimensions. Payroll entry is a great example of a memorized transaction. It's something recorded frequently. You're typically coding to the same accounts, but your amounts might change slightly depending on how many days are in that pay period. Statistical entries, so these are manual entries to any non-financial account. And then, of course, there's adjusting entries, any reversals of those that must be posted to closed periods. Just a call out note here. So this screenshot of memorized transactions, you see a depreciation entry on here. If you are subscribed to fixed asset management module, then your year-end and month-end posting of depreciation, that is streamlined. It's literally a kind of a one-click option where you can pull in all of the, it's called due depreciation, due to be posted for that month end, and post that all at once. So that would not be an entry you would have to have in a memorized transaction listing. So Okay, so other features for recording year-end entries. So you may have, one-time adjustments or manual entries you're making at year-end that you don't have every month end or even at quarter end. The features listed on this slide, these are all available in the General Ledger module. There's just one here that we have in green that does require a separate subscription. But these are some features, again, the area of efficiencies and streamlining to help you, again, save time and help save, users so they can redirect to other tasks and processes that need to be completed. So transaction allocations, if you're not using them, these are a great way to distribute amounts across multiple dimensions based on a predefined percentage or exact fixed amount formulas at the time that the transaction is posted. Good example is if you have a utility bill and you need to allocate that across 5 departments, you can use a transaction allocation to do that. Dynamic allocation, so these are a little bit more enhanced type of allocation. This feature helps automate the distribution of amounts after the fact using calculations based on historical postings to allocate across multiple dimensions. A good example is you want to allocate benefit costs in the same manner that salaries were recorded. So allocate benefits to the same departments, classes, any other dimensions to which salaries had been posted. The automatic reversal process. So in any journal entry that you are bringing up and recording, there is an automatic reversal date field. You can fill a date in there, and the reversal of that is posted immediately at the same time you post the original entry. At your journal entry listing, there's a reversal or duplicate button, an action button at the top of that list that you can check the box to select an entry and then click reverse or duplicate and proceed with that action. So that's a quick way to reverse or duplicate something. And then if you are not using them but have a need to report on any other basis than your primary accounting method, you can set up user-defined books with user-defined journals for specific entries for other reporting types. So some examples are, say if you're accrual-based, you can have a cash basis user-defined book. You may have pro forma basis, fair market value, literally any other reporting method that you need outside of your standard primary accounting method. So one last call out related to adjusting entries before we close out this section. Just be mindful of assigning permissions for adding adjusting entries and the reversals that post to closed periods. Adjusting entries are the one feature in Sage Intacct that will post to closed periods. So I recommend people keep that permission kind of close to the vest, usually keep that locked down to, probably top accounting management, 1 or 2 people, something like that. Because if you are assigning those permissions, even after you close the books, someone could enter an adjusting entry because it does post to closed periods. Okay, let's move on to talk about reconciling our bank and credit card accounts. So first feature we're going to talk about is connecting feeds for your bank and credit card transactions. So this is kind of number one, streamlined, efficient process in the cash management area of Sage Intacct. So if your bank participates in one of the programs offered, then connecting that feed directly to Sage Intacct can be a much quicker way to finish your bank reconciliations. There are 3 main connectors that work with Sage Intacct: the Plaid connector, FiSpan, and Access Pay. So you see those listed here at the top of the slide. There's a 4th one that I don't have listed. It's unique to Bank of America Cash Pro accounts. So Bank of America Cash Pro does have their own information reporting API connection for bank feeds. So if you do have Bank of America, you'll want to investigate that as opposed to Plaid, FiSpan, or Access Pay. When you search in the banking cloud of your account, FiSpan and Access Pay will be denoted in the name of the bank when you're searching. There's also some really good Help Center articles about getting started with your bank feed, and also some that contain tables and lists of banks that participate in one of the 3 programs or the Bank of America Cash Pro, and then step-by-step instructions to connect your feed. I've also listed here a couple of search terms or keywords. In the Help Center, you can search for that quick reference guide or the bank feeds FAQ article. Those would be great ones to get you started, or if you're troubleshooting or have other accounts that you're adding, good information for you there. Any full admin user can go into company admin subscriptions, and those are listed alphabetically. Scroll down to Sage Cloud Services and turn that on. Then assign users permissions for those that need to work with connected feeds. So also a note here, so Sage Intacct does not charge fees for connecting your bank or credit card accounts. FiSpan, AccessPay, or your financial institution, they may have associated costs. If your bank happens to be an institution that does not currently participate in any of the connector programs we just discussed, there is a bank transaction assistant feature in cash management that can be used to import files downloaded directly from your bank's website that contain transactions for the period. In the Release 3 update that just came out in August, there was an enhancement made to the Bank Transaction Assistant. They added a few more file types that are now supported for uploading the files and making that a more streamlined process. I won't go through everything on this slide. This is actually a callback to our Release 3 webinar that is listed on your resource page. So if you want to click that link to go back to review any sections of that Release 3 Forvis Mazars webinar, please feel free to do that. But we just wanted to mention here that now there are some additional file types supported. My next slide does contain an image here. This is an actual screenshot of the Bank Transaction Assistant file import user interface page. And you can see now there's, you can drag and drop a file, upload that. There's also a green oval here, you get another action button to get a guide specific to the file type you have. So the enhancement here, efficiency is most any bank file that you download, you now don't have to take that information, cut and paste that into a different type of Sage Intacct import. There are multiple file types supported, and then even guidance for things like 3 versus 4 columns if your amounts are in a single column from your bank, or if those debits and credits are in 2 different columns. So a lot of functionality available there with Bank Transaction Assistant. Okay, also in the area of bank and credit card account reconciliations, I think everybody, if you're reconciling and you have the feed or you're using the import, then you probably already have these set up, because you would see an error message if you didn't have a rule set, what's called a rule set on your bank accounts. But these are, again, another great way of letting the system do the work for you. So matching rules are where you create criteria, those conditions, such as, match this based on check number and amount, or amount and posting date, description. We recommend using 2 or more of the conditions for better results in posting, rather than just a single condition to match, especially with amount. If your account has a lot of transactions for a similar amount, there could be kind of mismatched that happens in the recon. So 2 or more conditions are best. Creation rules are a type of rule where you can direct the system to automatically create a journal entry or a credit card transaction, again, based on conditions you set. So an example of this would be, if the description contains staples, record this to office supplies. So using a combination of matching and creation rules, you create a rule set and then associate that with your bank and credit card accounts. And then, as I mentioned, let the system do the work for you. So get all that set up and then take advantage of using matching and creation rules. Okay, next we will have pass to Sarah for our polling question 3.
Yes. So before we get into agenda item number 6, we are at polling question number 3. And it is, how many Form 1099 vendors do you transact with during a calendar year? So go ahead and lock in an option A through D. And I do want to mention we have Deb in the background from our Sage Intacct team as well, here to answer any questions. So I know Sheila is providing amazing detail. The slide deck is super helpful, but if you have specific questions about your Sage Intacct environment and your year-end close process, Deb is here with us in the background to help answer your questions. So by all means, please take advantage of the Q&A functionality here in the webinar platform. All right, results are in.
Interesting. Thank you all. I do love seeing these answers. Okay, that kind of helps me gauge the 1099 conversation as well. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, let's move into, we're going to go through the next couple of sections pretty quickly because I do definitely want to get to the 1099 area as well. So when it comes to verifying results, this is essentially where, we're going to be looking at our reports and dashboards to verify financial and statistical results. So this slide, of course, it lists, a lot of different types of reports in the system. Again, if you've been in the system a while or brand new, a lot of these are familiar to you. I have screenshots here of, several that I favorited in a demo environment. These are, can be common ones that you run, kind of standard in a module, or you may have some custom financial reports that you run. Just two quick points I want to mention about this. So if you haven't taken advantage of two features in the system, one I want to mention in the area of reporting is you can create a report group and schedule that out to email or process and store in the system. There's a nice recurrence option called following general ledger close that's available when you schedule either a single report or a report group of many that you put together. So that will run when you close the general ledger. So for example, if you had to reopen to put an entry and close again, then of course that recurrence is going to occur each time you do close the ledger. But that's nice, especially if you are responsible for sending reports to executives or board members. That package going contains final numbers if you've got your recurrence set for after the general ledger close, right? When everything has been completed. Second thing I would mention is if you have large reports where, maybe it's a long period of time or you have a large number of entities, large number of accounts, if you're finding that those are running in the system and, kind of that page runs and it times out, use the process and store feature to let that run offline and store it in your report center so you can access it when it's ready. That way you can keep working and running in the system, doing other things while that report runs offline. The Sage Copilot, we'll take a look at that near the end of the presentation. I'm going to take a quick peek into the release notes and point out a few areas. But Sage Copilot, this is also on that slide I had before with a lot of AI and machine learning. Sage Copilot is new in release 4. There's some early adopter programs. One of those is for variance analysis, which relates exactly to this verify results section of a year-end close. So be sure to check that out and inquire about that for joining the early adopter program if you are interested. And then this is just an example of dashboard in the system. So again, verifying results is when kind of you look at all that analysis and determine, is everything in? Do we have everything finished? And then we're ready to close the general ledger officially. So as we mentioned, closing the general ledger, it closes any of those remaining open subledgers. We looked at that slide earlier today. So if you hadn't already closed AP, AR, time and expenses, that type of thing, those will close with the general ledger. You don't have to close them separately, but you can. We talked about the staggering method where you can do those on different days. So this feature, to close your books is on general ledger. So it's in a slightly different location than close the books on the subledger menu, just up a little higher in the second column. If you don't have this on one of your dashboards, so recommend kind of controller or CFO, you may want to add the close through summary for visibility onto a dashboard that you frequently use. This can be set entity level or summary level. This is just a screenshot here that shows an entity level summary, and I can see, the last date or through what period my GL and active subledgers are, closed through. So just want to mention that about closing the books there. And then after you close out your calendar year, this is a very short list of a few tasks that you may want to perform early in 2025 in the system. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. Posting, adjusting journal entries. So we talked about those that post to closed periods. We also recommend, if you're using them or you're interested in them, maybe you don't have them set yet, in the GL setup configuration area, review and update your locked fiscal year settings if you have a need to change those, or if you're interested in turning that on. You can learn more about that. There's a quick question mark there you can click on to review that Help Center article about locking the fiscal year periods there. I also recommend to usually my clients that I implement to make a note in your January calendar to go into the system and create your default reporting periods. So how this process works is when you click on default for reporting periods on the company setup checklist, system looks at today's date and creates them if they're not already there for a 3-year period. The current year you're in, the prior, and the next year. So for example, in January 2025, system will review, and if 25 and 26 are not yet created, with one click, you can get all those standard reporting periods created. Important for budgets and things like that as well. And also, you can't close a period until the period is active in your system. So when you get to February and you're going to close January, if you don't see January 25, that's because the default periods had not been added. So very important note to do that. Also review your credit card accounts and those expiration dates. Extend any that are outdated or you see that are maybe coming up soon. Someone else on your team may have received envelopes with the new company credit cards that have new expiration dates. So you'll want to get those updated so you can continue using those credit card accounts in the system. And then last but not least, get ready for your Form 1099 reporting. All right, so let's run through a couple of these slides. So to prepare for the 2024 Form 1099 reporting, there's 2 great links in the 2024 release updates that have enhancements to the system for the 1099 season. This slide here lists bullet points. These are, again, very high-level steps in a good order. You're going to review the R4 highlights, any Help Center resources, generate the 1099 report from the AP menu, take a look at that initial version of the report to verify the results, corrections required, update vendors if you see any tax ID numbers missing or any vendors that should get the form but they're not designated. There's a couple of import templates you can use to do that. The vendor 1099 transaction update, and then vendor 1099 opening balances on your company setup checklist. Especially if you are an organization that went live during 2024, there's a portion of the year where your vendors were paid amounts from your legacy system. So you will need to either manually add those opening balances onto the vendor records or use this import file to load those, and then Sage Intacct sums the opening balance and AP activity you have paid them from Sage Intacct, and that's the total reported on the Form 1099. So after making those corrections, run that 1099 report again to verify the accuracy and completeness. And then for anyone who answered option A to the last polling question where you have 9 or less, you are not required to e-file with the IRS. You can still, send in paper forms, but 10 or more 1099 forms do require the IRS e-filing. So Tax Bandits does have a seamless integration within accounts payable to e-file. I've got this slide here. Again, just want to call out create an account with Tax Bandits first before you enable this in AP, because when you select this, the system will ask you for your Tax Bandits credentials. That's why you must create that account first. So let me, you all will have this slide in your download, but let me do a screen share and go directly into the release notes and show you where to access the 1099 information, including some good videos that are out there, the Help Center resources, and that type of information. So I'm going to navigate back to the home or start page of Sage Intacct. And here under the Release 4 notes, I'm going to click on Read Release Notes. And on this page, I'm going to scroll down to the section headed up Control and Compliance. And we have 2 sections here. So I'm going to click on the 1099 e-filing, powered by Tax Bandits. This provides that information and again, access to help topics, running the 1099 report. You essentially, there is a new area that will be on your AP menu when you enable this. You will sync and send your 1099 information directly over to your Tax Bandits account. And then within your Tax Bandits account, complete any form corrections, e-file, and send recipient copies from Tax Bandits. So it's essentially has like a 5-step process here. The Help Center article is great because it takes you step by step through in the perfect order how you create your account and then turn this on in Sage Intacct and begin using it. And I'm going to navigate back to the highlights page and go into the Get Ready for 1099 season. So this is the area that has a few videos here about the 1099 process and also a separate Tax Bandits video as well. Thank you, Sarah, for bringing up the last polling question.
Absolutely. So people can lock in their answer here, and then if you wanted to show a few more things as we get to the top of the hour here.
Yeah, that was, I think that, I guess, Deb, are there any questions out there for any questions that we weren't able to get answered in the Q&A chat?
No, we've answered all of them. Okay,
perfect. All right, so I will probably leave you all again with, here's the slide for resources. A lot of these we talked about. Again, this will access the Release 4 notes where I just was in the system. This is the Release 3 webinar I referenced when we talked about the Bank Transaction Assistant enhancements, and then other articles, and then just generally subscribing to our 4 sites area on the Forvis Mazars main site. So my contact information is here. Again, if you think of any questions or want to dive deeper into any of these topics, please feel free to email directly, and we can connect and have further discussions.
Thank you. Thank you to our attendees, and thank you very much, Sheila. Great presentation.
Thank you. Have a good day.